Welcome to the StockMentor.com studios here in the Black Hills of South Dakota. I'm your stock mentor, Brian Johnson. I'm making professional trading simple. And finishing the day today, a little, well, I'd have to admit that at the beginning of the day, I was watching it up until about noonish or so and thought, wow, this is really going nowhere. I was expecting a lot of volatility. Typically get that during options expiration week. And then all of a sudden it came pouring in, and we got quite a move to the downside and a very good recovery towards the end of the day. But that is the type of volatility I'm talking about. And if you're going to be trading this week, it's very difficult to not be at your computer doing it and trying to manage trades because just at a moment's notice, and today was a perfect example of that, that at any moment's notice things could just move really quickly one way or the other. And when that happens, you have to be there to have, stops on your trades or, kind of just take whatever profits you have at the time and kind of move out. And we'll see that reflected in some of the equities that we look at today. So let's dive in, look at the markets here, and you can see that we had a break today of this trend line that I drew in this last weekend for those of you that were following along. The Dow, had not broken through this trend line yet, and it did break up and above this high, especially on the gap up this morning. We saw that reflected, and then just started to kind of slowly fall apart during the course of a day. Did break this trend line, came back into previous what was resistance, now is acting as support. We saw it on two levels. This is kind of less, I kind of give this one a little less credence than I give this one, but you can see where it came down and touched this, only to come right back up and close the 60-minute candle right on this support line here. It took off from there, moved up into the close. Now it'll be interesting to see if we get what typically happens, or not, I shouldn't say typically happens, but what's common is for a stock to, once it breaks a trend line, come back and retest the underside of it. And I'll be curious to see if we get that kind of a movement here now in the Dow after they had a little gap up in the morning. We did come back and refill that gap. So it was a completed move. So we still have, for all practice, really, there's still nothing broken. How about I just say that and make it easy? There's still nothing broken here. We are still have the possibility of going definitely higher here and maybe finally touching that 10,000 mark that keeps getting talked about in the Dow. We move on to a daily. You can see here that we are starting to look a little bit overextended. This little candle up here, yeah, sure could be construed as a reversal candle and could, for all practical purposes, be, but in order for me to believe that, I need to see a confirmation candle of that tomorrow. I've seen a lot of these happen right at the middle of a move like this, only to see the stock continue higher. So as I said, we have not reached the top of this channel yet. If we do, we will definitely be up at or even above this 10,000 mark. So tomorrow, earnings, economic news, all of that is going to come into play this week. And as I said before, this is one of the reasons why I like to be very careful with my trading during options expiration. You can see here on the 60-minute of the NASDAQ, it broke its trend line and started to come back up towards the end of the day. I don't know if it'll make it back up into this area, but I'll be curious to see if it'll even make it past this line here and get back to this lower trend line. And here's where it is on a bigger time frame. And I talked about this weekend, that this would be a very nice short play. You're at a double top area and you're below this resistance line. So a very, very defensible short right up here at that 1750 area. So it would have made for a very good short up here towards the top. Very defensible. Could have played that on a day trade. On a weekly standpoint, don't really care much at this point. We're still on Monday, but really no movement at all. Just a little tiny doji up there. SPX on a 60, looking kind of similar to all the rest of them, basically. And that's a move up. Now, this one has already tested the underside of this particular trend line here. And move back down. I suppose I could probably tweak this trend line and make it look more like the Dow trend line, but I'm going to keep it here for now. We did get up to that, I said 1075. We gapped over that actually this morning and then stopped right at that 1080 mark that I told everybody about. And I said it should act as strong resistance. Would definitely definitely thought we'd see a bounce there at the 1080, whether it was a small pullback or whatever. Of no, certainly just made sense to me to see something at that point at the 1080, and we certainly got it with this heavy move here. And there was a lot of volume that moved in on this move here. There was a lot of volume that came pouring in. Now, is that people preparing for the next big move down? It still has yet to be. A lot of people, might have got a little nervous at that. They saw the huge volume pour in, and they should have. By all means, if you're a bull, you've got to be cautious about that type of thing. But really, looking at the charts from a bigger time scale, that volatility is not so unexpected during options expiration week, and there is nothing broken. Still nothing broken here. So we're looking for a push back up towards this 1080, above 1080. I'm really curious, actually. I've been doing a little bit more work, and I'm really curious about the 1085 mark now. Now that I've had a little bit more time to see our price action, where we've been and where we're potentially going. If we can break this 1080 mark, I'm actually very curious about our 1085 area now to see if that'll hold. Anything above 1085, I still think makes it back to that 1100 area. But that'll be the next move, or the next item, or the next point of resistance for me will be 1085 if we get up and over it. You can see here, arguably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days up in a row now. Move to the upside, pull back at that 1080, but still a nice recovery by the end of the day to make it, 1076, still very respectable, and it is a close above 1075, which had been previous resistance up to that point. So now the bulls are they're just really trying to squeak their way up and over this 1080 mark. If they do, there will be bears that'll cover. SPX on a weekly, you can see we are at the beginning of the week, but you can see where the candle opened, and that'll make for a very interesting, I think, look or view of the weekly once we get to the end of this week. Very curious to see where this candle's at that point. We are now above this resistance that goes way back to 0708, and we are still back inside this rising wedge. I had somebody ask me, well, aren't rising wedges bearish? Yes, they are, but they're not bearish until you get a close outside of this line. I actually like to see two, but that's just me. So yes, we're still watching this rising wedge, and the next stop for it on the weekly is, as I mentioned, about 1100. VIX on a daily. Now this one had a little turn at the end of the day, started to put in what was maybe going to be a hammer, and then closed back down quickly right at the 23 mark. Weekly, we'll take a look at this. I mentioned last week how we closed below the 200-week moving average. That was at 23.52. Notice how we still close below it again here this week. A lot of days to go. I'm sure there'll be a lot more volatility to be playing with over the next few days. Apple on a 60-minute. Some people had a little scare this afternoon. This was a huge move in Apple.